Okay, welcome back to the show. Today, great pleasure. We've got a costume designer for two hit series out on Netflix at the moment. We've got Dahmer, which is Monster, and The Watcher. Costume designer Rudy Mance. How are we doing today, Rudy?
I am great. I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's my pleasure. And on line two, you know him, you love him. It's Ken Stauffer from Oceanographer. How are we doing today, Ken?
Hey, doing all right. That's one of the simpler intros you've given me. That's a
I
thank you.
know. I normally go and do an elaborate gag to introduce him, but I didn't get time today. Anywho, well, Rudy, again, it was really great to catch up with you because Ken and I have been back and forth watching Dharma, the Watcher, and don't worry, darling, that's not long been out. I know you were, I think, assistant costume designer on that. Is that right?
Yeah. That was my last. I went out with a bang and assisted Ariane Phillips on that. So,
Right.
and a couple of famous people were in that one. So.
A few, yeah.
Would you mind touching on that in terms of your role? I mean, I know Ariana Phillips was like the main head for that, but what was your involvement in the film?
Well, I assisted Ari, and so she and I, together worked on the references and sort of, worked with Olivia Wilde, who was the director, and just sort of created the world. It was an interesting and kind of incredible dream project, not only to get to work with Ariane, but also, I mean, that cast was beyond incredible. But also, I mean, we gave it sort of like a late 50s, early 60s vibe, but we kind of had carte blanche to make it up and sort of, play around with the idea and with the concept. And so Ari gave it a bit of a futuristic, it was both futuristic, but also kind of a throwback to like the classic, back when the patriarchy was quite strong, the 50s and 60s, where the women, it was before women's lib, and, they were just expected to sit at home. And it was the idealized world of Chris Pine's character Frank. So it was a really fun project, and we got to have a lot of fun and just play around and be really creative. So it was great.
A couple quick questions on that. So it's got a beautiful mid-century look from the clothes to the. It's a gorgeous film, but I'm curious for. I saw an article someplace. Oh, it turns out "Don't Worry, Darling" is secretly a movie about suits. I'm curious for a lot of the clothing. Was it? Oh, yeah, the dancing. Was most of that custom made, or did you source some vintage stuff, or what was the mix there?
We did both. That still you just showed with Harry and with Chris. It's been a while. Chris's, I remember we made that at Western Costume, and Ariane and I found this incredible. It was the most incredible fabric. It was like one shade off white, and we chose to put Chris in white there just to sort of make him pop and stand out a bit. And then I don't want to misquote, certainly for Ariane, but I think Harry wore in the end a Tom Ford suit, a tuxedo. I mean, both those men wear clothes so well. So
it's a beautiful flubby fabric.
I was just noticing that.
Yeah, it was really interesting. It had some texture and dimension to it, and so it really made a beautiful suit.
That's interesting. Also, I don't think it says anywhere that the film is set in the 60s or the 50s, but it has, like you mentioned, that kind of otherworldly quality where it could be futuristic and it could be 60 years ago. I mean, it's you've got quite the broad brush there to paint the landscape with, right?
Yeah, it was really great. And I mean, and that's the genius of Ariane. She really, adapted, her version of what it should be, because it really does take place in an alternate universe. And so I think she was really incredible with combining the past with the present with the future.
Yeah. Just a quick question, by the way. Spoiler alert for anyone that hasn't seen this movie yet. When we see Harry and he looks terrible, what is that supposed to be present day, or is that in the future slightly? What are we looking?
Wait, that's the back of me. Hold on a minute. Right now,
you had to get that Bond connection in there.
I had to, yeah.
I think it's supposed to be, present day, or whatever the film's version is of the present day.
I see.
Yeah, that was a weird twist when we got to it in the script.
When I was watching it, I was kind of, I was noticing the cars and the clothes, and I'm trying to pinpoint in my head, maybe it's 1962 or 1963. I know it's not real, obviously, but and then when they show him in the real world with that From Russia with Love poster, I'm like, how lucky this guy found a simulation that takes place at that time.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know about you guys, but I had some Edward Scissorhand vibes watching this film, and take that within the spirit that's intended, really. But again, kind of set within like a very a microscopic world in terms of how the size of the circle and all the husbands going off to work at the start of the day, and the women kind of milling around their gardens and stuff like that. I don't know if that ever came across the mood boards at any point.
I don't think Edward Scissorhands, no, but yeah, it's and anything that you can't really tell what period it is I think that's maybe a similarity. But that's also a great film, so why not?
Yeah. No, I love that movie. Well, Ken, did you want to move on to The Watcher? Let's switch gears seamlessly here. Ken. Yeah,
this is the big question on The Watcher. Was this as much fun to work on as it was to watch? There's such amazing actors playing such like colorful characters. You got Jennifer Coolidge, Richard Kind, Margot Martindale. You had Mia Farrow, for God's sake. It's such a fun thing, and you got to dress them so cool. You had Coolidge in those wonderful coats, like you just showed. I loved Richard Kind and Margot in the like kind of matching like peacock blue and all that. So anyway, what was it like working on this, and how much free reign did you have in terms of the costume? How much was Ryan Murphy versus your contribution there?
Well, I mean, Ryan's always very involved and very hands-on, and he always has a very clear vision and always gives us very clear and precise direction. And so with Richard and Margot's character, it was a script note. He was just like, oh, put them in a matching tracksuit, like 2/3 of the time. And so we sort of used that, and then from that we just always sort of dressed them comparably, similarly, so they would always kind of go together. And there was I can't remember the name of there's a fine art photographer who does these sort of weird portraits of people. I can't remember, but Ryan gave us that portrait and said, do them like this. And so he sort of gave us one photograph, and then we sort of went off of that. But yeah, it was fun. I mean, it's always challenging, especially doing episodic television with the pace and it was a really big cast. And that's the other great thing about Ryan, he draws in a name. And so, yeah, I mean, to get to work with Mia Farrow is like, I mean, I can retire now. And she was so incredible. I mean, half the time we'd go in to get her dressed and she'd be fully dressed already, just sitting there. And then, she would tell us the most incredible stories of her life. And, the directors would be outside, like, can we get her? But it's like, you're like, just a minute, and you'd pretend to be dressing, but really you'd just be listening to, her stories and what she was doing in the 60s and the 70s. And
that's so cool.
Really incredidy. And Jen Coolidge is just, I mean, funnier than even anyone knows, and smart and witty. And she's a dear friend now, and she's an absolute, I mean, half of her lines that actually made it on camera, like none of that was in the script. Like it's all her, like, there's a scene, and if you know Jen, you see her at the start of the scene, like she smells the napkin and does a weird face, and then she wound up saying like, and this smells like vinegar, and it's like that was never in the script. The genius that she is from ad-libbing, and I
Yeah,
think
there's all these little bits of business she does. I noticed one time when she's got a tennis racket, she just kind of holds it like a guitar and like sticks her fingers through it, the netting, and so.
Yeah.
I love the phrase holiday pour as well. I think I'm going to nick that one.
Yeah, and that was another thing where like I heard it when I was watching the series, and I was like, wait, what? And I was like, that was never. And also, like, I think she like calls out the waitresses by name, and it's like that also wasn't in the script. Like, she's so sweet, she probably during rehearsal was like, honey, what's your name? And then like, she was like, can I get a holiday pour? But it's, I mean, who had ever heard of a holiday pour before?
Yeah.
And on the flip side, oh, sorry, I missed that, Rudy.
So yeah, it was fun to work on.
Oh yeah. Now with the core family, with Baba Cannavale and Naomi Watts and the kids, it seems like they're always in kind of gray and beige. There's a moment where they first walk into the house and Naomi Watts says, I don't know, it feels a little sterile. And then you look at how she's dressed her family, and it's like, isn't that your whole vibe?
Yeah. Again, that was Ryan. He, from the beginning, he said, I want them to look this way. I want them to always be, monochromatic and doing, like shades of gray and tans and camels and pewters and whites. And so, and then, I mean, again, like one of the greatest things about working with him, not only is he's always very precise and knows exactly what he wants, but he's also like 6 months ahead of the trends. So like, as we were doing the series, towards the end of it, we started seeing in all of the shops, like everything was head to toe monochromatic. And it's like, it's Ryan knowing before anybody else what the next trend is,
Gotcha. There's also, I love this camel outfit here. Can we talk for a second just about where some of Cannavale's clothes came from? Because he really looks great in the show.
Yeah. And that was, again, a note from Ryan. He's like, I want Bobby to look like he's never looked before and dressed like he's never dressed before. That suit and a lot of his suits came from, because we didn't, you always try and make as much as you can, but on a contemporary show and certainly, a TV budget, you can't always make every suit. And so a lot of his suits came from Suit Supply, actually. And he also wears clothes so well. It's, we didn't have to work that hard, but a lot of his suits came from Suit Supply. And then his shirts, I think that shirt and his white shirt were Tom Ford. And then that tan shirt we had made. Just I wanted him to have a shirt that matched his suit. So, and then
made by Anto in Beverly Hills, right?
No. I told you it was Anto, but Anto made a lot of the shirts for Don't Worry, Darling. This was actually made by Seago in New York.
Oh yeah, interesting.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Wow, Ken, the Anto reference. Ken's a huge lover of Anto.
No, I thought I could spot him a mile away. Apparently not.
They're both really, really talented shirt makers.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Also, going back, you had a few shots there ago. Naomi Watts. There's so much fun, kind of like knitwear. It's the coziest show I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Are you it's like even if the sweaters are like.
What's that?
Are you getting hounded by like viewers or friends? Like, where can I find a sweater like this or anything like that?
Yeah, there's a whole Instagram account, and I think she's in Paris. This girl runs it, but it's like she does screen grabs of like where you can buy it, and so there's and a lot of people are obsessed with her jewelry on it too. Again, Naomi, it's like every fitting, like we would take a photo and it was like a Vogue cover. Like she just like, and she knows how to pose, and she's really. It's funny. We had I put all of the fitting photos up, and then. We did her first fitting, then Bobby's fitting, and then when she came back, and then when Bobby came back for his second fitting, he was looking at Naomi's, and he's like, "She really knows how to pose." And so then he's like, trying to pose to outpose Naomi. But yeah, I mean, she just wears clothes so well and is so beautiful. It's again, she made our job very easy.
Yeah.
Rudy, quick sidebar question. You mentioned that there's like an Instagram account that goes around and kind of helps people to shop the look, as it were, from your designs. How do you feel about that? Is it kind of like, well, you're the one that's modeling these people and designing it, and then there's other people that are perhaps maybe getting affiliate handouts through channels like that? I mean, I've always wondered, just from your side of the fence and costume designers' side of the fence, how you feel about those sort of channels.
I mean, I think so long it's nicer that people are, and what I focus on is that people are enjoying it and like it. So long as, you know, they're not trying to say that they costume design it, I'm okay with it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that happened to one of your colleagues, Ellen Rojnik, who we had on last week. We spoke to about how, you know, things happen with certain tailors and designers that they might work with within the film itself, but then when they don't use their clothes, or they say, look, this simply didn't work, then them designers and tailors will go away and say, we created the entire look for that film. And then she would say, that's when you cross the line. Anyway.
Yeah. And I know Ellen very well, and she will tell them that they have crossed the line.
Love that.
She's the best. She gave me my start.
Nick? Was it the Nick?
Nick, yeah. She got me into the union, and, you know, she was really incredible. I was a costumer the first season, and then I had just left my early days. I was an assistant at Vogue, and that was one of my first jobs when I got into film. And yeah, I was a costumer, and she came up to me one day on set. I'll never forget it. And she's like, "Why are you wasting your eye?" And then she, you know, got me into the union, and then I assisted her and dressed all the background. And yeah, so it's all Ellen's fault.
Well, she was great. We had her for half an hour on the first episode, Ken and I, and we were attempting to go through her entire filmography, show her outfits and styles, and then as we got like up to speed, as it were, the film thing, she just said, guys, why don't you come back tomorrow? We'll do this properly. You know, I'll carve out an hour, and then so we had her for an hour the next day as well, which was just, you know, terrific.
Just so much energy.
I mean, she's done every movie ever.
Yeah. And we still didn't cover Bridgerton or any like of the heavy hitters that she's.
He tried to bring up Cliffhanger like 8 times, and
she wouldn't talk about Cliffhanger. But I mean, can't have everything.
God, did she do Cliffhanger too? Jesus.
Yeah, she did. She said she tried to watch it. She had it on telly the other night. It came on like one of the channels, and she said she only got 20 minutes into it. So, well, in fairness, the first scene of Cliffhanger is Sylvester Stallone in a vest up the top of a mountain. I mean, there's not, you know, it's like up the peaks, like -20, and he's wearing a vest. So I did like that. Anywho, talking about time, I really want to get into Dahmer, Rudy. And Ken, perhaps you can kick off.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sorry. Now, the show obviously spans a broad set of time. It goes from, I guess, 59, you know, when his mother's pregnant, all the way to 94. And I feel like you nailed every decade. And
Thanks.
I'm just curious. Yeah, if there's one through thread, though, it's got to be brown plaid. I feel like there's a lot of But again, is most of this stuff sourced, or is it made, or are you like?
I mean, everything. This show was a monster to undertake, and it bounced around so many times throughout each episode. You know, it was like I had a really, really incredible and massive team that really put me on track. And you know, we had binders and research folders and. You know, binders of, you know, every sneaker that came out by year and every jean that came out by year. And, you know, we called in, you know, J.C. Penney catalogs and Montgomery Ward and Sears. And because you couldn't really look at Vogue, or, you know, we had some GQs, but you couldn't even really look at that, because if you think about, you know, now, like, everyone in the middle of nowhere can find Vogue with Instagram and, you know, the internet. But back then, you know, you really whatever happened at Vogue, it would take, 3 to 4 years to sort of trickle down to what they were selling at JCPenney, which is where a lot of these characters would have shopped.
Yeah, that's what it really did feel real and lived in. Like, like a shirt that you might buy at Kmart with horizontal stripes on a polo, or or
that strangely enough, we got. I think we did a lot of shopping at JCPenney.
Yeah,
which God bless them. They are timeless.
A lot of it reminded me of stuff my dad used to wear, honestly.
Yeah.
Well, baggy leather jackets, all that stuff.
Yeah, well, and especially a lot of the older actors, when we would get them dressed, they would look in the mirror and say, like, "Oh my God, I look like my dad, or I look like my grandfather." It was. Yeah. But in terms of where we got it, I mean, we went to the rag houses and, dug through bins. We made a lot of it. I mean, the rental houses in LA were absolutely incredible. And we kind of went everywhere, like to every vintage shop, like everywhere online, like, because we spanned, from the 50s to the 90s, we scoured everywhere.
Yeah.
And Ryan, also one of the reasons why I think it looks so great and so concise in terms of the colors is he gave us a very, very specific color palette. And he said he wanted it to look like a used urinal cake. So he said, shades of yellows, tans, browns, rusts, olive greens, no red. He's famous for not using any red.
Well, I think it really captured
little.
Did every guy in the room go, "I know that look, the used urinal cake"? But then all the women looked at each other and go, "We need to do more research on this." don't know what he's on about over there.
I'm curious too, because obviously, these are awful real life events. How much of the clothes did you have like a real reference for? Like, I know the Halston hat that poor Tony wears. I've seen photos of him in that. Jesse Jackson's obviously, we all have a mental image of him. I'm just curious how much the real world played into the design.
Well, like that Halston hat, for instance, we couldn't find a Halston hat to save our lives. So we wound up making that one, actually, and I had them screen print the Halston. But a lot of the clothes, were we did, Etsy dive, but we really did try, and as many photos as we can find. And there were very, very few photos of, I think each character, only had, maybe 4 or 5 photos that we could find online. I mean, even Jeffrey, there's, obviously him in the orange jumpsuit, which we also had to make because all of the jumpsuits we were finding were contemporary cut. And so I wanted to be really, really specific with everything, and everything that we could match, we did, but we didn't really know what he wore in his day-to-day life. So I used a lot of stripes in the show. Not only was it, of the period, but there is a few photos that I found that he was wearing stripes, but like the famous one of him, in the striped dress shirt. That was actually his dad's dress shirt, because they just gave him his dad's clothes so he would look proper. His stepmother did. And there was a couple of photos I found of him, like drunk, passed out in college, where he was wearing plaid. So we sort of, built the character around that, and,
And there's a scene where he goes and he buys a short sleeve dress shirt at a store, and it's just filled. It seems to be filled with vintage suits. Was that a task for you? Is that the production design, the set design? This is a mammoth undertaking.
Yeah, that I mean, a lot of those suits are contemporary, but I worked really closely with the production designer Matthew Ferguson, who I've with quite a few times now. He did The Watcher as well, an American Horror Story. But we always work closely together, and I think we loaned them a couple of suits, just the ones that we really saw up close. Yeah, and in terms of the, you asked like how accurate you wanted it to be. The courtroom scenes, I think, are the most accurate, and the ones that I wanted to be the most precise, because those really are the ones that you not only can Google, but you can actually watch. And we did watch the testimonies. And so like, Rita Isbell, one of the victims' sisters with the 100% black shirt, we made that, and all of Molly's clothes we made. And I even found like the actual brooch that she wore, which was like a vintage Monet that I'm sure she bought at Penny's. They still sell it. But that was those scenes were the scenes that I was the most specific about matching exactly. I just thought, a lot of the victims I know and their families weren't happy that we were making it, or wasn't happy in the end. So I thought we owed it to them as storytellers, in the very least, to be as accurate and precise as possible for them, if nothing else.
Yeah, actually, that brings up something I'm curious about. It's obviously rare that any character's costume resonates with the public enough to become a popular Halloween costume. But in the case of Dahmer, obviously it's terrible taste. But I'm just curious. I'm sure you've seen some of this online. How you feel about it, and I imagine it's weird for you, but I'm just curious what that experience is like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's weird. I get weird messages now online, like how people sympathize with Dahmer. I don't think that was the intent for any of us going in. I mean, Evan really portrayed him in such an exacting and, I think, true and kind of incredible way. But at the end of the day, he was troubled, and he did have a sad, life and upbringing, but he also brought a lot of sadness, and he was a monster. And so I like you said, I think it's poor taste too. I understand, I guess, why people would want to maybe dress up like him, but it's I think it's just
a bit weird.
Yeah.
It's I think it's people not really, I don't know if it's an age thing, because I mean, I'm old enough to have lived through the 90s and stuff when this was coming out. I actually remember buying the Dahmer book, because it was almost like one of the first of this kind to really hit the zeitgeist growing up. And my mum even took the book away. She was like, "What are you reading?" I was like, "Well, this is kind of like a really unique case, just a horrible subject matter, but a very, very unique thing that's not, like I say, really happened at that moment or before. I know we had serial killers before, but this was really something that was it pierced the thin skin of the UK spirit over here. And people that are perhaps in their teens or their 20s might have seen this, but they haven't lived through what that was like, So anyway, just my spin. Rudy, let's move on from Dahmer. It's a fantastic series. The clothes are great. But I mean, also I had a really strange moment where I was working out watching this, and I've realized it's not a great working out series to watch. Because I was working out at the same time he was working out, and oddly I was doing the same reps, and this is just, I had to put everything down and go, I've got to do something else here.
For a walk, yeah.
You go for a walk, but I do recommend everyone watch it. It is on Netflix, and I think you've painted the landscape for that series perfectly. And
Rudy, obviously now you have American Horror Story New York on the air. I'm curious, do you have any project that you're working on currently?
I think I'm going to start one probably next week, very last minute. I finished the film, I think about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and then I'm. It's not official yet, but I think I'm going to co-design a couple episodes of the next season of Feud that Ryan's producing, and Gus Van Sant is directing all the episodes. So it's about this season's about Capote's women. Based off of that book. So late 60s, early 70s. Naomi's going to be in it again. And it's a big cast and a big undertaking. So I think that's probably going to be my next move. Ryan draws you right back in.
How did you connect with him in the first place? Like, you've obviously worked with him for years now, but
Yeah, I work really closely with Lou Eyrick, who's his longtime costume producer. So she sort of oversees and hires all of his projects, and she's actually she and I co-designed the first episode of The Watcher because I was still finishing up Dahmer, and I think we'll probably co-design this next one together. But she's been with him for well over 20 years, and so I met her. I had just finished The Alienist.
Oh.
And so I met her in New York, and she was needing somebody to do Pose. So I met her on a Friday, and then on Monday I was working with her, and I haven't had a day off since.
Yeah.
And just for our listeners, the film you just completed was with we're all about Bond connections here. Is with Felix Leiter himself.
Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah, Jeffrey Wright, and that doesn't have a title. Cord Jefferson is the writer and director, and he wanted to call it something, but I think it got kicked back. So I just talked to him yesterday. So I think that'll come out. I want to say probably like 4 to 6 months that'll come out, and then again, it's not a done deal, but I'm hoping to do a play on Broadway that a friend, Joe Mantello, is going to direct. So it'll be my first Broadway show, and I'll probably start that once I finish on Feud.
Great. Do you prefer series, TV, film? I mean, I know you've done film as well. Non-stop and things like that. You have a preference, or do you like to mix and match it just to keep yourself interested?
I mean, it's much easier to do a film in a lot of ways. Certainly the pace of it. TV, it's really, if you have 10 episodes, it's like doing, a 10-hour movie versus an actual movie, which, generally an hour and a half to 2 hours. So the pace of film is much, more manageable. But I think in terms of, especially where we're going with streaming, I think there's so much good content for TV. It's funny. It's like, it used to be nobody, if you did film, you did film. And if you did TV, you stayed in TV. And now, everybody does TV. So,
yeah.
So I'm just happy to work so long as it's a good project. And
cool. Rudy, thanks so much for taking time out to walk us through that. It was some great stories, really, really interesting, and best of luck with future projects. Look forward to having you back on in 4 to 6 months, along with Jeffrey Wright, of course, who's more than welcome to come in and sit in.
Great.
We'll talk about his suits from Source Code, his T-shirts from No Time to Die. Honestly, we'll just go through the lot.
Jeffrey loves to talk, so I'm sure he would.
Oh, well, yeah, he doesn't need a written invitation, but he's more than welcome. Where can people find you, Rudy? Rudy Mance on Instagram?
Yeah, Rudy Mance on Instagram. And
Best place to hang out?
Yeah.
Great. And Ken at Oceansographer, people know how to get hold of you, and we'll leave all the links in the show notes. Thanks so much, gents, and catch you soon next time.
Thank you. Bye.